This morning, you woke up and brushed your teeth without thinking about it. 2 minutes. Minty foam. Spit. Done. You didn't consider it a ritual. You didn't consider it strange. But the real answer to where this habit came from is far stranger than a tube of toothpaste. Your ancestors were doing something to their teeth long before toothbrushes existed, long before soap existed, long before most of what you'd call civilization existed. And the evidence is still sitting in their fossilized jaws, waiting to be read like a diary written in enamel and bone. So when did this actually start? Not centuries ago. Not even in the age of pyramids. It goes back much further than that. Further than you'd guess if someone asked you right now. Let's rewind. Around 50,000 years ago, a Neanderthal in what is now Spain chewed on a stick. Not for food. For relief. Scientists studying ancient teeth found grooves worn into the enamel, tiny parallel scratches running along the sides, all facing the same direction. These aren't random. They match the pattern you'd get from dragging a thin object between your teeth, over and over, to dislodge something stuck there. In other words, an ancient toothpick, used with enough repetition to leave a permanent scar in solid enamel. Think about what that means. Enamel is the hardest substance in the human body, harder than bone. For a habit to leave a visible groove in something that tough, it wasn't done once. It was done daily. Maybe for years. Archaeologist Karen Hardy, who has spent years analyzing dental calculus scraped from prehistoric skeletons, found something even more surprising. Hardened plaque on Neanderthal teeth contained traces of plants with medicinal properties, plants that have nothing to do with nutrition. Yarrow, chamomile, bitter herbs that wouldn't have tasted good and wouldn't have filled a stomach. That means these early humans weren't just eating whatever was in front of them. They understood, on some level, that certain plants could soothe pain in the mouth. Discomfort led to action. Action left a mark. Millions of years of evolution had given them a brain wired to notice a problem and try to fix it, even with nothing but a twig and a bit of bitter bark pulled from a nearby tree. Isn't that strange to picture? A Neanderthal, jaw aching in the cold, reaching for a plant the way you'd reach for a painkiller in your medicine cabinet. And this wasn't isolated to one cave in Spain. Similar grooves and wear patterns have shown up on Neanderthal remains found across parts of Europe and the Near East. Different valleys, different climates, same behavior. Which tells you this wasn't a one-off invention by one clever individual. It was something closer to instinct, something that kept getting rediscovered wherever humans and pain intersected. Fast forward past the Ice Age, past the first farms, past the first cities, and you land in ancient Egypt around 3000 BCE. Here, the evidence stops being subtle. Egyptians made an actual tooth powder. Historical texts and preserved papyri describe a mixture of crushed rock salt, dried iris flowers, pepper, and mint, ground together into a paste-like substance sometimes called a tooth cream. No handle, no bristles. Just fingers or a frayed twig, rubbed directly onto the teeth and gums. Why would an ancient civilization go through that kind of effort? Because bad breath and tooth pain were social problems, not just physical ones. In a world without dentists, a rotting tooth could end a life. Infections spread from the mouth into the jaw, into the bloodstream. There was no antibiotic waiting on a pharmacy shelf, so keeping the mouth clean wasn't vanity. It was survival, dressed up as hygiene. Archaeological studies of Egyptian mummies have even found evidence of dental disease so advanced it likely contributed to death in some cases, which tells you something important. Even with tooth powders, even with all that effort, ancient dental care had limits. The instinct to clean was there. The tools to actually fix serious problems were not. Around the same era, in regions of Africa, the Middle East, and later India, people began chewing on a specific kind of stick called a miswak, cut from the Salvadora persica tree. This wasn't random plant chewing like the Neanderthals. This was refined, deliberate. The stick's natural fibers would fray at one end when chewed, forming something that looked almost exactly like a modern brush head, bristles and all, grown by nature instead of manufactured in a factory. And it wasn't just mechanical scrubbing. Later chemical analysis found that Salvadora persica contains natural antibacterial compounds, along with trace minerals that modern toothpaste manufacturers still study today. The people using it thousands of years ago had no concept of bacteria. They had no microscope, no germ theory, no understanding of what was actually happening inside their mouths. They had thousands of years of trial and error passed down as tradition, refined generation after generation. And it worked anyway. Here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. This wasn't a niche practice confined to one region. Variations of the chewing stick appeared independently across multiple continents, among people who had no contact with one another. In China, twigs were chewed similarly by the time of the Tang dynasty. In parts of the Americas, indigenous groups chewed on specific barks and roots for the same purpose, long before European contact. In sub-Saharan Africa, different tree species served the same function, passed down through oral tradition rather than written record. Different climates, different languages, different belief systems, different gods, different diets. And yet the same basic solution kept appearing over and over, something fibrous, dragged repeatedly across the teeth, chosen from whatever local plant happened to work. Why would completely disconnected societies land on the same idea without ever comparing notes? Because the problem was universal. Wherever humans ate food, food got stuck between teeth. Wherever it got stuck, it decayed. Wherever it decayed, it hurt. Pain is a remarkably effective teacher, and unlike language, it doesn't need translation to make its point. Now travel to ancient Greece and Rome, and things get a little less pleasant to imagine. Greek physicians, including writings associated with the school of Hippocrates, described tooth powders and pastes similar in spirit to the Egyptian formula, sometimes made from crushed oyster shells or other abrasive minerals mixed with fragrant herbs to mask the smell. But Rome added an ingredient you would never expect to find anywhere near your bathroom cabinet: urine. Specifically, the Romans discovered, likely through the same kind of trial and error that shaped every ancient remedy, that urine contains ammonia, a compound that acts as a natural cleaning agent. Wealthy Romans reportedly imported it from Portugal, believing it produced whiter teeth and fresher breath. There are even historical references suggesting a tax was placed on urine collection, because demand for it, across laundering and dental use combined, was genuinely significant in Roman commerce. It sounds absurd today. You're probably making a face right now just imagining it. But strip away the discomfort, and the underlying chemistry actually holds up. Ammonia really does break down grime and whiten surfaces. The Romans weren't wrong about what it did. They just didn't have a substitute yet, and they weren't especially picky about where an effective ingredient came from. Isn't it strange how something so repulsive to you today made complete, practical sense to someone standing exactly where you're standing now, in front of a mirror, just trying to solve the same problem you solve every single morning? Centuries later, the picture starts looking more familiar, more like something you'd recognize. In Tang Dynasty China, around the 7th century, historical records describe a device using bristles, coarse animal hair attached to a bone or bamboo handle. This is widely considered one of the earliest true toothbrush designs, the direct ancestor of the object sitting in your bathroom right now. The bristles were often taken from the necks of hogs, specifically chosen because the coarse hair held its shape under pressure and could scrub effectively without collapsing. This design didn't stay contained. It traveled along trade routes, adapted by different cultures as it moved. By the time it reached Europe centuries later, it had been refined, exported, and eventually mass-produced. In 1780, an Englishman named William Addis is widely credited with manufacturing the first commercially sold toothbrush, reportedly after sitting in a prison cell and improvising a cleaning tool from a saved animal bone and bristles smuggled in from a guard. Whether every detail of that particular story is precise, or slightly embellished by centuries of retelling, the broader timeline is clear and well documented. For the vast majority of the roughly 300,000 years modern humans have existed, nothing resembling your toothbrush existed at all. Think about that ratio for a second, because it's easy to say and hard to actually picture. If you compressed all of human history into a single 24-hour day, the toothbrush you use every morning wouldn't appear until the final few minutes before midnight. Almost the entire day would pass with humans relying on twigs, powders, frayed sticks, and, occasionally, ammonia. So what does that mean for you, standing at your sink tonight, half asleep, going through the motions without a second thought? It means the urge itself, the instinct to clean your mouth, to remove what's stuck, to soothe what hurts, is ancient. It's not a product of modern marketing. It's not something a corporation invented in a lab to sell you mint-flavored gel in a tube. It's a behavior stitched into you by tens of thousands of years of ancestors who had rotting teeth, real and constant pain, and absolutely no dentist to call when things went wrong. The specific tool changed across that span: twig, stick, bristle, nylon, electric spinning head. But the impulse driving the behavior never did. There's something almost comforting hidden inside that fact. Every time you brush, you're not just following a modern health guideline printed on a box. You're repeating a Neanderthal's instinct to reach for a stick when something hurt. You're echoing an Egyptian carefully mixing salt and mint by hand before sunrise. You're continuing a habit so old it predates written language, predates agriculture, predates almost everything you'd instinctively call civilization. Anthropologist and dental historian Ricardo Ortiz, whose comparative work examines dental artifacts across dozens of ancient cultures, has noted that oral hygiene may be one of the most consistently observed self-care behaviors across every documented human society, more consistent even than practices surrounding food preparation or clothing. Which raises an interesting question, one worth sitting with for a moment. If nearly every culture, independently, across thousands of years and different continents with zero contact between them, converged on some version of teeth cleaning, What does that actually say about how deeply this behavior is wired into you? Maybe it says that pain has always been the real teacher, not tradition and not culture. Just the simple, brutal, unavoidable fact that an aching tooth is impossible to ignore, and a human brain built to solve problems will always look for something, anything, to make it stop. That brain didn't need a dentist to explain bacteria. It didn't need a chemist to explain ammonia. It just needed enough discomfort to try something, notice it helped, and pass that discovery on to the next generation. You inherited that same brain. The same restless, problem-solving instinct that sent a Neanderthal reaching for a twig 50,000 years ago is the exact same instinct nudging you toward your bathroom counter tonight. Nothing about that impulse has changed. Only the tools have. So tonight, when you pick up your toothbrush without a second thought, you're not performing some modern ritual invented by an advertising campaign. You're finishing a conversation your ancestors started 50,000 years ago, in a cave, in the cold, with nothing but a twig and an aching jaw, and an instinct that refused to just sit there and do nothing about it.